Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shane Varnum. I'm currently on the board of directors for SHFM as the senior supplier. As the senior supplier, I'm also the chair of the industry advisory board. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our first Industry Insight, what we hope to be a series of webinars going forward. I want to take a moment and explain to everybody what the Industry Advisory Board is. We are a group of individuals of suppliers who continuously try to share the voice of our supplier community to SHFM and the industry at large and our perspectives. We are what some of you know as the group who does Hunger Games. We do much more than just Hunger Games though, although that's certainly important. One of the things that I'm most proud of our Industry Advisory Board is during our COVID-19 pandemic, many of us got together under the leadership of Mike Johnson and came together and came up with some resources for you, our industry. You should be able to locate them on the SHFM website under COVID Reentry Resource page. I think you'll find lots of useful information on there. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit it, I encourage each of you to do so. If you have further questions about what the Industry Advisory Board is, or perhaps have an interest in joining, I encourage you to seek me out offline and I'll be happy to discuss that with you. Before we continue, I'd like to pause and say a huge thank you to all of our generous annual sponsors. If it wasn't for you, our sponsors, during these difficult times, bringing you programs like we are today would be difficult. So again, a heartfelt thank you to all of our annual sponsors during this trying time for all of us. Now, like most of you, this is probably my umpteenth Zoom call, and I don't want to admit how many, but I do want to do a slight housekeeping with you. On the bottom of your PC or your phone, you will notice there's a few different features. The primary one I point out to you today is that of the chat feature and the Q&A. As we get going in today's presentation, if you have anything that you would like to ask, I encourage you to please do so in that chat panel. And we will do our best to incorporate your questions during our presentation. And certainly we'll do our best to get to all we can at the very end. Now, without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, our first guest speaker, Dr. Tracy Brower. Dr. Tracy Brower is a sociologist exploring work, life, and the changing nature of work, workers in the workplace. She is the author of Bring Work to Life by Bringing Life to Work, a guide for leaders and organizations, and a contributor to Forbes.com, and a Fast Company, as well as a principal with Steelcase Applied Research and Consultant Group. Again, Tracy, as on behalf of all of us, and a huge shout out to Frank LaRusso, who showed us how amazing you are. I turn it over to you, Dr. Brower.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. Thank you for having me. Thanks to you, Frank, for connecting us all. And I really look forward to the time with you. We've done so much planning for this session, and I'm so impressed with all of you and with the organization. I might have to change industries or something and join you somehow. So thanks so much for having me. I am going to minimize so you can see my screen a little bit better. So we want to talk today about predictions for the future of work. And we want to start with just a little bit of a discussion about paradigms. Remember in the olden days in business, those of you who are old enough to remember, we talked a lot about paradigms, and that word became a bit of a joke because we used it too much and it lost its meaning. But it is so apt today because when the paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. All of a sudden, when the paradigm shifted from horse and buggy to automobile, it didn't matter how great your buggy was, you weren't going to sell a lot of buggies. And we are in this moment where the paradigm has shifted very significantly. So here are some paradigms to consider in what's happening to us today. The paradigm of safety and security is really critical. It's the organizations who provide for safety and security through the pandemic, and also the organizations who help us to feel safe and secure, whatever services they're providing, that will be most successful. I love to think about the Maslow hierarchy. Remember, we all learned about the Maslow hierarchy in high school. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about the upper layers of the Maslow hierarchy. We worry about whether people have a sense of belonging, how much they feel valued, whether they have an opportunity to self-actualize. But what's happened is a lot of us have been bumped right back down to the bottom of that Maslow hierarchy. And we're worried about our physiological safety and our security. And we've got to be able to kind of meet those needs for people. Absolutely, food service and hosting and hospitality and all the core competencies that you all bring contribute at all of those levels of the hierarchy. So it's interesting times how that will be different. Health is really critical. The businesses that will win are the ones who are providing health. For example, health provided online and healthcare online has grown from about 2% to about 70% recently. Well-being and mental state are critical, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But organizations providing for well-being and mental state will probably see an uptick in business. Relationships are interesting, right? Like how we're shifting our dynamics. A lot of people were not seeing as much. Some people were seeing more, and that's shifting relationship dynamics and the businesses who support them. Life cycles also interesting to think about. Any good demographer will tell you follow the life cycle of babies, and that is where the market will go. So if we happen to have a baby boom in 6 months or so, it'll be interesting to see the life cycle and how we have products that follow the life cycle and how those will create some new winners in terms of the market. The other interesting thing to think about is the experience of home. A lot of the things that we normally experience in the workplace or out in public or through our entertainment are things that we're experiencing at home. We might have more usage, and so we need to replace that coffee machine more frequently, or we might need to buy supplies that we didn't have to buy as much for home. We might look around and go, wow, I really want to redo that deck, and I hadn't really been thinking as much about that. So that's an interesting aspect as you think about business winners and losers. Another interesting shift for us from a paradigm perspective is moving from a retrieve model. I go out and shop, I go out and buy, I go out and choose, or I go out to eat, to a receive model where I'm shopping online and I'm receiving products, or I'm receiving food, or receiving other kinds of things brought to my home. Travel obviously is shifting, and so is entertainment, including, you know, there's something called a sin tax. And so some of those quote unquote sins are things that we're doing more at home. We're consuming more video at home. We're doing more online gambling. Alcohol sales are up. For goodness sakes, puzzle sales are at an all-time high. We're just doing more at home in terms of entertaining ourselves. The reason this is important to us is because these are businesses that we all work in. These are businesses that we support. These are businesses where employees are supported through the kinds of services that you all offer. So it's interesting to think about the market and how the paradigm shifts and how there may be some shifts in business winners and losers. The other thing that's interesting to think about is our mental health. There are so many studies on mental health right now, and one study suggests that 75% of people are feeling a level of social isolation, and that is correlated with work from home. More work from home, more social isolation. The other thing that we know is that people are struggling with well-being. 67% of people are experiencing stress, 57% of people are experiencing anxiety, and the list goes on. The reason that's true is that we have less choice. We have more cognitive dissonance. Things we're used to aren't the way that we're used to from before. There's more friction. There's more stress in all kinds of areas of our lives. We're wearing a lot more hats lately. We might be doing more cooking or doing more childcare or doing more teaching at home, or potentially we're lonely if we're living by ourselves. There are more distractions in the work or in the home environment that we're not necessarily used to. So mental health is important. The reason it's important to us is because as people start to return to the workplace, these are the people who are going to be surrounding us and whom we're supporting with things like food service and hospitality and childcare and fitness facilities. And we are also going through some of these challenges. That's the interesting thing about these times, is it's so ubiquitous that those of us who are supporting are also those of us who are going through some of these challenges. And well-being is holistic. This is Steelcase's model for well-being, which is holistic, saying it's all about not just physical well-being, but also cognitive and emotional well-being. And the processes and the context that we create for people in all kinds of work settings are absolutely tied to how they experience their work and how engaged they are. So here's a question for you, and we can pull up that poll question if you don't mind. This is the question that we'll ask you to answer. How significant do you expect the changes in the work experience to be? Sweeping, things will never be the same. Moderate, things will be different, but not too overwhelming. Insignificant, things will be crazy for a while, but then they'll pretty much get back to normal. Or, I'm not sure, they seem to be changing daily. If you don't mind going ahead and just registering your vote kind of off the top of your head, that would be great. And I'll ask Shane, what are you seeing? What is the preponderance of answers here in our highly scientific poll?
I cannot see the results.
Well, someone out there can.
Yeah.
Who's Vanna for us today?
Hi, it's Tony. I can see the poll, and let's see here. Well, I think I can see it. Give me 1 second here. Right now we have about 2/3 in, and it looks like the just scrolling here, it looks like moderate things will be different, but may not also be too overwhelming.
Sounds good. Thank you for that scientific result, Tony. We really, really appreciate it.
And I can show you the total results if you'd like.
You can show us which results? Yeah, that'd be great.
All of them, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'd love to see that. Ah, here we go. Awesome. Yeah, nice. Oh, but look at that. We still have a lot of people who say sweeping. Super interesting. And, right, this is all dependent on your context. So no wrong answer. We're all answering from our own individual perspective. I think it's going to depend on your situation, on your industry, on your region, on the type of work that you do. But really, I think we're in a place where if we look at kind of a meta level, these changes may be absolutely significant and sweeping in terms of a reinvention of the way that we think about work. Again, any individual circumstance may be an A or a B or a C or a D, and that's absolutely relevant. Overall, this is going to really drive us to some new opportunities. And I like to say, as we're thinking about reinventing and reimagining, we want to think about how we respond to the pandemic. We want to think about how we're shifting based on the coronavirus. But we also have an opportunity to rethink and reimagine in a new future. And we all have such an influence on this, no matter what our role is. There's an opportunity not just to respond to the pandemic, but to think about how do we go beyond and how are we better anyway as a result in terms of how we affect work and the workplace and workers. We know that engagement is really critical, and you all talk about engagement a lot, right? This is the power of discretionary effort. This is that person who gives that extra oomph because they're engaged, because they care, because they feel like their organization cares about them. And gracious hosting is something that sends such a strong message. Everything counts in the work experience, and hosting and food service and the amenities and the support that are available to people means so much here. There's also a really important social power of food and sharing and community and connections. We have a very cool thing that we do with Steelcase and with many of our customers, where we'll have a luncheon and each person will invite 2 other people. So we end up with a group of about 12 from our original list. But we're really, really careful to pass food around rather than having each person serve themselves individually. There's something about passing food around. I know it may be tough. That may not be something we can get back to in the short term. But just food itself, even if we're having a box lunch together, even if we're sharing coffee together, even if we're in an amenity kind of a situation together, those are moments that we share, and there is power in those moments in terms of feeling included, feeling connected, and feeling engaged as a result. So, how will work change, and what can we imagine for ourselves and for the future? I think that asking the right questions is actually more important than having all the right answers, especially as things are changing. Do you remember when this all started? It feels like ancient history. It feels like dinosaur times. Because things are changing so fast, we want to think about the questions as much as we want to start thinking about the answers. So here's one of the ways that work will change. One of the ways is through what companies do for people. This is about expanded support. We've seen some amazing examples of expanded support. It's Monday mindfulness sessions. It's Tuesday yoga with Christine. It's Wednesday wellness days, or it's the financial planning session that we're offering to employees. This is something that is expanded in the short term, and we expect to see this continue to be expanded in the long term. Employee demands will continue. There's a wonderful example of an organization in the Bay Area that's doing cooking classes for employees. There's another example of an organization that's sending home treats for employees. For example, Sodexo does a crunch time box with Lavazza coffee included. Very cool. They're saying thank you in the short term, and they're even saying welcome back as people are starting to come back. There's one organization where they have lots and lots of really young employees, people who are starting right out of college, and they're used to eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the workplace. And now that they've been sent home, they're saying, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I have the skills to do this. I came from college, many of them, and now I'm in the workplace. And so these expanded support programs in all of their iterations and in all of the ways that you can think about those innovatively will absolutely continue, and probably even get to the point of more diversity. The other interesting thing is an appreciation for mental health. As we talked about, mental health is a critical issue. We're all going through it to an extent. We may have ups and downs. We may be mostly good, or we may be mostly struggling. But one way or the other, we are all experiencing mental health in new ways. So we expect to see those kinds of programs expand. The other cool thing that will absolutely happen is improved leadership. This is a time when there is no room for mediocrity in leadership. When the water level goes down, you can see the rocks in the bottom of the pond. And this is the moment where leaders need to step up. Leaders who can provide vision in the face of ambiguity. Leaders who can be empathetic. Leaders who can continue to deliver business results and hold people accountable even while they're being sensitive. That's the kind of leadership that's going to take us forward. And the brilliant leaders are rising, receiving recognition, and those are providing for modeling opportunities for other leaders. So we can see continued improved leadership in these times. The other thing to think about is company culture. Company culture is, quote unquote, the way things get done around here. It is, quote unquote, what people do when no one's looking. This is a moment for culture. Culture ends up being true north when everybody gets sent home. You can't kind of look to your leader anymore who's right there walking through your area. Your colleagues aren't sitting right near you to provide that safety net or that little bit of guidance or encouragement. Culture ends up doing really hard work today because it is true north for our behaviors, our choices, and our actions. So companies are thinking hard about culture, and the work that you all do, food service, hospitality, hosting, amenities, fitness centers, childcare, are all demonstrations of culture. That is the body language of culture, and I think culture is absolutely having a moment and will continue to have a moment. We want to hear from Jenna Calhoun, who is a rising star, and she talks a little bit about some of the changes that she's seeing in her environment. This video may be a little glitchy depending on your Wi-Fi and my Wi-Fi coming together, but listen especially for the audio because she's saying some really wonderful things.
Hi, IAB and SHFM community. Jenna Calhoun, rising star from Nestle USA here, and wanted to share some of the awesome ways Nestle is supporting their employees during the COVID pandemic. It started with a huge increase of transparency and communication from the leadership team to really identify what the needs of the employees are, whether you're a corporate headquarter employee out in the field or one of our frontline heroes in our factories. Each person has been really given empathy to determine what their circumstances are and required to do their jobs, whether that was taking extra assistance from our EAP programs, extending our PTO policies, extending pay in the event of a factory shutdown. I've been so impressed by the agility of Nestle as a huge organization to care about their employees. These are certainly the times where you look and see what companies that you admire are doing, and I'm really proud to work there. It's a flexible return to work policy, but I can tell you as someone who's out there in the field selling, I am really looking forward to the day we can see customers again. So hope everyone is safe, well, and really doing all they can to be healthy. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks to Jenna. I love that example. She talks about empathy and EAP programs. And the really exciting thing that she talks about is her commitment to her organization and how her organization has demonstrated so significantly that they respect and value employees. And we all have that opportunity. So here's the question for you. How will you create a sense of safety and security for employees going forward? You know, safety and security is perception as much as reality anymore today. What are you smelling when you walk in the door? Does it smell super clean? Are you seeing people cleaning around you? Are you seeing new approaches to hosting and hospitality that speak of cleanliness and speak of that deep respect for employees? Those are our opportunities to be really, really reimagining and improving and renewing what may have also already been great experiences. The other thing that may change is how people work together. There may be really improved relationships with teammates. One of the things we know, sociologically speaking, is that we bond through really difficult experiences. And this has been a doozy. We're going through some really, really, really hard times. And when we come out on the other side, we will have this bond together. This moment is a center point in our lives, regardless of how old we are. This is a dividing moment, and we will look back and say, wow, I remember how things were pre-pandemic, and we will look forward. But this will be a defining moment for us. And it may really create some deepened relationships and opportunities with team members. The other thing that's really interesting about this time is diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know how critical this is, and we've been reminded of it in some really, really powerful ways. The other thing about this is that we're hearing that people who may have struggled in the past in their workplaces may not be struggling as much today. Like if you were mobility challenged and it was hard to get around the office, or if you sat in a conference room and it's hard to see or hard to hear, when you're home, there's a more equitable playing field in terms of who can participate, and you can turn up the volume, or you can increase the resolution on your screen. And so we're hearing that leaders and businesses are saying, gosh, I feel like I'm really able to tap into more of the best of all of my employees. And that's pretty exciting as I think about, we hear from business leaders, how I might increasingly tap into a more inclusive kind of environment. The other thing we're hearing is real empathy for work life. There are lots and lots of people who may have been able to kind of leave home at home and go to work and may not have mixed those together very much in the past. And we know that work life is really, really something that's increasingly appreciated given where we are today, because work and life are coming together. Interesting. We used to talk a lot about the boundary between work and life. How do I leave work at work? And how do I make sure that I have time for my family and my partner and my spouse and my friends and the things that I want to do in my personal time? Now we're hearing people say the opposite. How do I leave family a little bit? It's really healthy to have some distance. How do I maybe get away from the laundry? Or maybe I just had a little tiff at home and I'm ready for some distance. So these are wonderful opportunities for us. And here's a perfect example of work life. Our favorite Frank, with his fish and his approach to work life. It's just a wonderful, wonderful example. The thing that's cool about what's happening to us is we are fatigued. We are on video. We aren't able to connect with people as much as we want to, but we sure are learning a lot about each other, right? Like we can see each other in our home environments. We might have a dog barking in the background, or we might have a small child who climbs on our lap during our video call. We're seeing each other in our baseball hats sometimes in a very casual environment. And we're seeing each other in terms of what we love to do, as in these examples. So those are the opportunities for us, is to really think about work life. And that's one of the predictions, that work life may be something we respect even more than we did before. So the question for you is, how will the ways that people work with others shift as we go forward? How will our ways of working together shift? And those will be some interesting opportunities. The other thing to think about is how the greatest innovations arise from the most limiting barriers. If we have no limitations, we can kind of do any old thing. We don't have to think really hard about it. With lots and lots of barriers, we have to think hard, problem solve. I love the MacGyver example. For those of you who are old enough to remember MacGyver, thanks for being with me on that. For those of you who aren't, MacGyver was this like high adventure, like action guy who was on a television show, and he would always get himself into these scrapes. But by goodness, he could find his way out of these scrapes. If he had a stick of chewing gum and some duct tape and a paper clip, he could make a rocket ship. That is innovation. That is something that we can achieve with really, really great barriers. And we are surely facing barriers today. So one of the predictions for the future of work is how your company's systems and approaches might change. You know, we've had to do some things really differently that have had to go around our normal practices. So we may see increased speed and reduced bureaucracy. As we think about organizational growth models, every organization to some extent starts up in the garage somewhere, figuratively speaking or literally speaking. You're kind of figuring it out. You're rolling up your sleeves. It's messy. You're not sure how it gets done. And then you figure out what works and you replicate that. You want hockey stick growth at that point. So you want consistency, replication. You want to absolutely have policies and practices that help you stay in tune with whatever's working. That is called bureaucracy. And when everything gets thrown up in the air, sometimes bureaucracy gets out of the way. So a really great example, we had a client that had everybody on desktop computers. And when they sent everybody home, they had to order 30,000 laptops, deliver them to people's homes, and figure out how to do their IT systems 24/7 to get everybody up to speed. That is a great example. And so what causes us to think through these times is, what are the things that we may have thought had to get in the way and were barriers that we're now thinking about differently? Those are the opportunities for innovation. So you think about some very cool innovations in this field, like smokeless frying, or touchless refrigerators, or touchless entry, touchless keyboards. Even ghost kitchens are continuing to grow. And so there are just really interesting opportunities to think about innovations. We expect flourishing in those areas. The other thing that's cool to look at is collaboration between companies that may traditionally be competitors. We've heard some great example of companies, actually restaurants, who have banded together to help their communities. Companies taking on new and greater importance in their communities and in their roles in communities. And companies not necessarily betraying deep, dark secrets or antitrust law kind of stuff, but sharing their recipes for hand sanitizer that they've switched over to producing, or sharing their patterns for the facial masks that they're now sewing. Those are really, really exciting innovations. And so we know that innovation is going to be all about the future and where we go from here. And Megan has some great examples here. So we will hand it to Megan here for a minute. Turn up your volume on this one especially, and really, really listen for the audio.
Hi there. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to grab something out of the fridge. These hot summer days really have me thirsty. I'm Megan Darrow with Wellbeing and a member of the SHFM Rising Stars. Workplace innovation has got to be something that we consider. Wellbeing is an organization of over 60+ food service brands, from ovens to ranges to heated holding, ice machines, coffee machines, and more. Wellbeing is actually innovating solutions to sanitize, sterilize, distance and deliver for our food service industry. We're manufacturing mobile sinks with hands-free faucets and actually foot-activated infrared water controls on 3 continents. By shifting one of our beverage brewing brands, we were actually able to manufacture hand sanitizer by the palletful. We can quick ship employee safety shields for masks for your employees. We have implemented refrigerator technology that actually kills viruses. We have countertop and quick set safety shields and no tools, no problem. We offer ice machines with exclusive sanitary features and touchless activation. Our smart pickup food holding cabinets actually offer a safe, secure, and automated way to get your food without any contact. Middleby is committed to providing food service safety innovations rapidly to the marketplace. Truly, the greatest innovations do come through the most limiting barriers. I would say our innovation these days is in total overdrive. So things that used to take months to get to market are now taking days. While our workplace experiences will not be the same, we continue to be optimistic about our reality, continue to innovate to meet the needs of our industry.
Awesome. And thanks to Megan, another rising star. I love her comment that the greatest innovations come from some of the greatest barriers. We are going to get through this and we're going to be even better on the other side as we reimagine. So the question for you, in what ways will your company's approaches shift in the future? And we all have such an influence on this, regardless of what role we're in. We can influence our organizations and really think differently. I think the other really interesting thing here is how we learn from industries that are not our own. A lot of new ideas come from the edges. They come from disparate ideas coming together. And healthcare has led the way in a lot of this. And so we can absolutely learn from healthcare. Here's another question for you. If we want to bring up that poll, that would be ideal. To what extent do you expect shifts in the way your company adds value to the market? Massively, the pandemic has brought about a reboot and a reimagining of our business. Moderately, some of us will change, but overall, we're still delivering value that's relevant to the times. Minimally, we're continuing to deliver on our fundamental value equations without tremendous change, or I have no idea, but I'll keep thinking about it. So if you don't mind going ahead and answering that poll, that would be ideal. And Tony, if you want to bring up the results and tell us about them, that would be absolutely wonderful.
Great. I see several folks responding. Let's give them just a couple of seconds here and I'll bring up the results.
Awesome. Sounds good. I always feel like this is The Price is Right. What do we have for the contestants today, Tony?
I feel like we need Jeopardy music, you know?
That's great. All right, here come the results. Ah, wonderful. Lots of moderately, lots of massively. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I think so. I think the shifts in our companies are going to be really significant. Some companies are changing the businesses that they're in, the customers they're serving, the way they're serving customers, and we have the opportunity to be really, really flexible in the process. And that is about career opportunities. I know it feels really counterintuitive to talk about career opportunities with so many people furloughed, with unemployment levels as high as they've ever been, but we know that there'll be renewed career opportunities. A lot of times in crazy cataclysmic moments, it's kind of 52 pickup, right? The world changes. Swim lanes that are traditional go away, silos can go away, and you can reach for that new opportunity that you may not have been able to reach for before. We expect to see expanded entrepreneurialism. This is, if everybody's making it up and figuring it out, we need people who are adaptive, creative, and can really be very innovative and resilient in the process. Resilience is about 3 things. Number 1, resilience is about having a stake in reality and kind of seeing what's going on around you. Number 2, it's being able to make sense of it, kind of think it through. And number 3, it's being able to improvise. Those are the skills that will take us into the future, and those are our opportunities. The other thing is that the brain is not elastic, it is plastic. If it were elastic, we're stretched and we just go back to the way we were. But we are being stretched and tested, and we will never go back to the way that we were in terms of our ability to adapt. And so you may not have thought about that really big reach before in your career, but you can now, because you say to yourself, I made it through that, I can try something different. Or maybe you always wanted to go skydiving, but it didn't quite seem in the realm of possibility. Jumping out of an airplane or doing some other thing that seems really adventurous and new and different and adaptive may seem in closer reach. So the question is, in what ways will you empower people to contribute in new and expanded ways? I love Megan's statement that they're innovating faster, more than ever before. This is our opportunity to jump in no matter what kind of a role we're in. And then finally, workplace and technology will change. We expect tons of work flexibility. I have talked to literally hundreds of customers in the last 3 months, and every single customer talks about expanded opportunities for where we're working, when we're working, and the kind of work environment we come back to. We are not taking the workplace for granted anymore because we are missing it. We are not taking food service for granted anymore. We are not taking hospitality for granted anymore. Maybe we never did, but if we did, we sure are missing it, and we have an opportunity to reinvent and reimagine even better offices and even better work experiences. The other thing that we know is that comfort with technology is absolutely on the rise. If we didn't have it figured out before, we sure have it figured out now. And Mike has some great perspectives on technology.
Mary, hey, I'm getting another call. Hold on. Chad, the man, what's up? Crazy, right? Oh, I think Granny's calling me on Zoom. Hey, Granny. Hi, all. Mike Denuzzo here, New York University. And I just want to take a few seconds to talk to you about technology in the workplace. So it's safe to say by now, what many of us refer to as the workplace has transitioned to our living room. And that's fine, because the reality is, no matter where the office is, work needs to get done. From online learning, virtual doctor visits, virtual happy hours, and an increase in mobile dining, shopping, and ordering, all industries are testing and leveraging their digital capabilities. Working in higher ed and being a student as well, I can truly say it's been both challenging and amazing to see universities around the world pivot and transition from traditional on-site learning to e-learning, all in a matter of days. Truly a remarkable feat when you think of the number and details. A more virtual workplace means a change in operations. The workplace was meant to evolve, and so is technology. They go hand in hand. This pandemic has accelerated change from many areas, but it's also provided opportunities just as fast. This is a time to reevaluate our traditional way of doing things. It's key to focus on employee engagement, to promote creativity and innovation, and most importantly, provide a comfortable and safe workplace for all. Technology was made to make things easier. Embrace it. Until then, I'll see you on the next Zoom call. Stay safe, stay healthy. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you to Mike, another rising star, for that beautiful, beautiful version of his perspectives on technology. That's great stuff. I love he's talking to his granny on Zoom. How can we go wrong with that, right? So the question for you is, in what ways will you need to shift the way that you accommodate work and technology? A couple of things here I want to mention, and that has everything to do with our social connections and our connection with people. Technology can be tough. It can connect us in lots of different ways, but it can also sometimes not do as good a job as being in person together. There's a brilliant, brilliant book called The Village Effect by Susan Pinker, and it talks about how face-to-face connections are absolutely correlated with better mental health, physical health, with lower morbidity and lower mortality. Our connections with people matter significantly. The other thing that's interesting to think about here is how we really consider psychological safety. We always talk about the importance of psychological safety. That is, I trust people. I feel like I can go out on a limb. I feel like I can take a risk. I feel like I can be creative. I feel like I can bring my goofy sense of humor, and I can bring all of myself and my best to work. That's what we know about psychological safety. But psychological safety is going to take on some new, really new definitions. So psychological safety may have to do with, I trust that people around me are going to wear their mask, or I trust that people around me are going to follow the circulation patterns in our workplaces in the short term until we get post-vaccine. I trust that people are washing their hands. I trust that people are behaving appropriately outside of work so that they don't put people at risk inside of work. It's really going to be important how we relate to each other and the social norms that we really subscribe to. Social norms have everything to do with inclusivity. When we are inclusive, a lot of times it's helpful if social norms are very explicit. Sometimes exclusivity has to do with not knowing the norm. I'm not sure what the dress code is, or I'm not sure which topics are okay to talk about, or I'm not sure what fashionably late means in this circle. But when norms are very explicit in terms of how we show up, it actually creates a more inclusive environment. Great example, we worked with a customer and they had about it was a little bigger size customer. They had about 175 people who had been present in the workplace already. And then they were bringing new waves of people in, and they were really having a challenge with kind of in-groups and out-groups, because the group that had been there for a while had these norms that they had created newly based on the pandemic, and new people coming in weren't following the norms. And so there was a little bit of a us-them thing going on. And so I think we're going to see an opportunity to really recalibrate our relationships with each other. We're going to have this really strong bond, having been through a hard time together, and we may have moments where we can recalibrate. This is going to be cognitive dissonance for us. We're going to be so relieved to get back to our workplaces, and yet they're not going to be everything that we remember them being. They're going to be different. And that's going to really introduce maybe some friction. We're going to have to think harder about things. Maybe we won't have the same amenities available to us, and so we need to plan ahead a little bit more. Maybe we're going to be running late to a meeting and we run to the south stairway and we remember that's only the down stairway and we got to run to the north stairway instead. Those moments of friction may create more conflict, like little things that didn't bother us, maybe bother us a little bit more in the short term, because for goodness sakes, this is hard and stressful. And so I think that technology has an opportunity, and workplaces have an opportunity to connect us in some really important ways. We are social animals, we're herd animals. Our approach is to find strength in numbers and to connect with each other for our well-being. And we haven't been able to do that as well. So the workplace becomes a place where we can come together over food and amenities and other kinds of hosting and hospitality experiences. And technology can link us to an extent, and we want to embrace that as much as possible. And we also want to embrace the opportunity to be together face to face. So these are the things that we'll be weighing and balancing as we move forward. So here are some resources for you. We can follow up with these later. This is going to be an opportunity for really hope in the future of work. We'll be able to survive. We'll be able to thrive together. But I think the most important thing is learning. None of us have this figured out. We are figuring it out. And I think the opportunity for patience is huge. Our family was ordering dinner every weekend. We used to go out every weekend, and now we order every weekend. And we're so aware that every time we order dinner, we're placing a vote for which restaurants survive. And so surviving through this is going to be something we do together, and our being patient together as we figure it out will be really, really important. So with that, let me invite you to reach out and connect. I'd love to stay connected with you, learn from you, learn what you're struggling with, learn what you're challenged with, learn where you're succeeding and growing and excited about the new learning opportunities that you're facing. And so with that, let me turn it back to Shane and Tony and see what kinds of questions we have or comments we have that are coming in.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. A few questions coming in. Again, I will encourage those of you, don't be shy, send it in, utilize that Q&A function down there, or if the chat feature is easier, that works too. Tracy, could you give us some examples of how companies are effectively supporting their culture as employees return to work?
Oh my goodness. This is the $6 million question, because with culture, everything counts. Some of you might be old enough to remember graphic equalizers. In the olden days, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had these things that were part of our stereo system, and they had all these little buttons, and you could have almost an infinite number of settings that went along with all of the little buttons for your stereo system and your sound system. And culture is like that. There are so many variables and so many things that we can adjust. And so with culture, everything counts. One of the really critical things about culture is leadership, right? We know that leadership that is present and accessible is significantly correlated with cultures that are constructive and productive. And so more than ever, leaders need to be present and accessible. Increasingly, people hear so much information and they're not sure what they should listen to, what's accurate, what's not accurate. And so leaders become a single source of truth. And so whether leaders mean to or not, they are modeling the way, they're setting examples, and the messages that they send are so important for people to make sense of what is going on, what it means for the company, what it means for their job, what it means for them. So I think leadership is a critical part of culture. Another critical part of culture is information density. Brilliant book called Team of Teams by General McChrystal talks about how we were really successful in Afghanistan. And one of the things that General McChrystal did very counterculturally is he shared lots of information with lots of people very immediately. That created information density where people knew more, they could make better decisions because they had lots of information available. Information density, communication, sharing, transparency is another critical element of culture right now. And another element of culture that's important to be aware of is connections. When we can connect people with others around them, that will go a really long way toward creating really, really constructive cultures. There's a sociological concept called Dunbar's number. There are about 150 people that you can stay closely connected with. That's the number of people that you kind of know them well enough to ask them about their family, or these are the number of people that if you ran into them in a restaurant, you could sit right down with them and it wouldn't be weird. The secondary network is kind of that next layer out, and the tertiary network is your next layer out from there. What has happened during the quarantine is our networks have become much smaller, much more siloed. We're talking to the people we're talking to, but we're not talking to those farther out networks. These are the people we see in the work cafe. These are the people that we run into in the elevator lobby. These are the people that we see over lunch, or over the buffet, or over the celebration, or over the town hall. It would be creepy to reach out to them through, email or text, but we love seeing them when we're further out. So what we can do from a cultural standpoint is increase those networks, increase that social capital for people, keep people connected through, readers groups or writers groups or best practice groups or interest groups. Keeping those connections in a culture is really, really what will help the health of that culture and help reduce the idea that distance is detrimental, because culture absolutely needs to thrive on our connections within it.
Great, thank you. Here's another, I think, timely one. What advice could you offer as to how we can effectively manage employees at work who don't honor others' psychological safety?
That is a really, really good one. I think that this goes back to a mantra that I love. A culture is significantly determined by the worst behavior it will tolerate. Isn't that lovely? The idea here is everything counts. We worked with a client years ago, and they used to hire people who were brilliant people. They had resumes that were like superstar resumes, and they were glistening examples of really smart, really incredible people. But some of them weren't so great with others. They didn't have the greatest people skills. And this company had a talent strategy. It was an explicit talent strategy where they would keep these people on and they would match them with a people person. So they had all these kind of people who were jerks walking around and getting away with it. Or this is the company that says, oh, that person gets great business results. We're going to kind of look the other way in terms of their interpersonal skills. That just doesn't work. We have got to hold people accountable if they are not really demonstrating the values of our organization. So first of all, we need to be really clear about the values. We need to hire for culture stretch, people who will push us in the right ways, but then we need to hold people accountable when they're not demonstrating our values. Be explicit about values, hire for those values, hold people accountable, give them feedback, give them the opportunity to improve, empower and develop leaders so they know what to do about it. Make sure you've got a clear performance management process so you can walk people through steps and give them the opportunity to get better, and then be willing to make tough choices and tough trade-offs if people aren't acknowledging psychological safety. I think a lot of times it's about giving people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes I think people don't understand their impact. Their intent may be really good, but they may not have a great sense of their impact. And so it's giving people enough information about their impact so they can better really match and align their intent and their impact, and really give them the opportunity to demonstrate that psychological safety, respecting, trusting others, being open, being transparent to others, and really fostering that positive relationship.
Great. This next one's a two-part question, Tracy. What do you think the biggest drawback to working from home, even when the pandemic recedes? The second part is and what is the biggest benefit to continuing working from home?
Oh, what a good one. I love that. I think the benefits are just obvious, right? Like I can have access to my family more frequently, or my partner, or maybe I live alone, but I have a pet. I have lots of time for the things that I want to do. I get to trade off commute time, and I don't know, maybe I get to sleep in a little bit more, or read a book, or take a class, or volunteer in my neighborhood. I get to show up in sweatpants lots of days. I can wear my fuzzy slippers, right? Lots of really, really great things. The cool thing about working from home is you get to curate and control your own environment to a great extent. I mean, some people live in tiny apartments and they're, sitting on their bed and they don't necessarily have a dedicated home office. Lots of people may be in that situation. But in general, your home is a place where you can curate and control. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits of working from home. One of the biggest drawbacks in working from home is the trade-off in social capital. Social capital is those networks that allow us to learn, to grow in our career, to feel fulfilled with our relationships. And we can absolutely still build relationships through technology, but it's not as easy, it's not as natural. And a lot of times the relationships we build through technology are the ones that we've already had, and they're less likely to be the new ones. It's great. I had this amazing call we did a roundtable with lots of pharma companies. And we were talking about the workplace of the future and how we a lot of times aren't taking for granted all of those experiences. And so we want to invest in those experiences going forward. And lots of people who didn't necessarily have the work experience, holistically speaking, on their radar screen, all of a sudden have the work experience on their radar screen, which is really good for all of us. But this woman said, we can talk about the future, but let's talk about why we're working so effectively from home. It's because we had such great offices, hospitality experiences, and food services before. We were helping people create social capital before because we did a really great job with our design and our creation of the work experience. And that is paying off for us today when everybody had to go home. Isn't that cool? We were busy talking about the chicken and she went back to the egg. So I think that we can credit ourselves, all of us who participate in contributing to the work experience somehow, and think about how we move forward with that. So I think the biggest drawback in working from home is that that need to create social capital, that need to feel connected, and the barriers to being that connected, doing that building of social capital as successfully.
Excellent, excellent stuff here. Can we apply the techniques to returning to the office at home and sort of ways of working? Any best insights?
Yeah, the techniques of returning to the office. I think about kind of pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. I think that's a really nice way to think about that return to the office. So in the return to the office pre-vaccine, we're thinking a lot about what our processes are going to be. And I think we clearly can apply those at home, right? Like I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to think about who I'm interacting with, and I'm going to limit my circle if I need to, if I'm immune compromised or if I care for somebody who's immune compromised. I'm going to make really good decisions about how I'm taking care of myself in terms of my mental health. And I'm going to make really good decisions about how I support other people. And those are things that we're thinking about for the return to work in the short term. And I think those apply at home. I think the other lessons learned that apply post-vaccine as well as pre-vaccine, one is all about process. Like we've always said, let's design a work experience around process. Let's start with the work process and design the work experience around it. And I think even more moving forward, that's something that we can apply. So when I'm coming back to the workplace, I want to think about who needs to be there. Who are they working with? Not just what are the physical adjacencies, but what are the work adjacencies? And we can apply that as we think about our own work as well. What are my processes? How can I be the most efficient and the most effective? And then how can I arrange my work schedule around that? So I think that working from home is all about the work. And so if I think about how I can work most effectively, that really helps to apply some of those lessons. I think the other lesson is all about how I cultivate those relationships, like in how I cultivate my learning and development. Learning and development can happen much more naturally when we're all in the workplace, right? Like I run into somebody in the work cafe and I get a new idea. I stand in line at the coffee bar with my CEO and I learn a lot about the context of our market and the context of our competition. If those things aren't occurring as naturally yet in the workplace because we're not all back, those are things that we want to think about for our work at home. How can I learn? How can I develop? And how can I be intentional about who I want to reach out to, what topics I want to learn, and how I want to stretch myself going forward?
Great. Well, believe it or not, we have time for one last question. And selfishly, I think this is a good one. It has to do with childcare, or frankly, lack thereof. We know it's becoming a very serious challenge for many of us parents who are now trying to work from home. Do you have any examples of how companies may consider addressing this challenge in the future?
Yeah, we're hearing so much about this issue. One of the things that we're hearing as a trend is companies who are significantly going to a hub and spoke model. So they're thinking hard about if they're in areas that are super dense right now, they're moving out of the dense areas. And so they might keep a hub location to do things that you can't do at home as well, like generative work, co-creation, collaboration, community building, but then they're having spokes, or think of them as satellites, where there are smaller offices where you could go to do more focused work. And that might help you avoid the commute or the conference rooms. You might also have greater access to childcare around those satellites, either childcare outside of the workplace or childcare in the workplace. There's also a really interesting, innovative new approach to childcare where you can buy time from a virtual childcare provider. So it's like, a couple of people who are super engaging on camera, who, dress up in their colorful clothes, and they'll literally entertain your children live time for a couple of hours or whatever amount you buy from them. So customers, we're hearing some innovative approaches to offering that kind of childcare for people. And we're hearing some innovative ideas about customers who are having families who know each other, who are teammates, kind of share childcare, or people who have older kids who are home from college or home from high school and are caring for younger kids. There's some of that really nice networking that's being facilitated by customers where teammates can help each other if they're in regional vicinities together.
Awesome. Well, again, Tracy, thank you so much for a fabulous hour. Your insight is amazing. I think we all learned something here today. I want to give a couple of quick shout outs if I can. Jenna, Megan, Mike, you guys rock. Those videos were outstanding. You are definitely rising as those rising stars. I do want to remind everybody that today's session was recorded. It'll be available along with those videos on the SHFM website, as well as the SHFM YouTube channel by the end of the week. As we pause and we think back at some key parts of Tracy's presentation, a few things stuck out to me. The empowerment of food, No one has any perfect answers, but we all certainly have opinions. And leadership of our culture is going to be key as we get back to work in some form or fashion or continue in this way. Again, Tracy, thank you so very, very much. A huge thank you to all of our annual sponsors once again for continuing to show your support.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. One quick thing I do want to point out is Tracy pointed out the importance of diversity and inclusion. And many of you may be asking, why aren't we talking about this? Because it is such a timely topic. Quite frankly, it's one of the many reasons why I am so proud and honored to be a member of SHFM. A few years ago, when our own diversity committee started, we recognized this as a society, that it is hugely important. And I am confident in the coming weeks and months that we will have similar topics around that very thing. So in case anyone's wondering, that is why. Again, just thank you to everyone for being a part of today. We look forward to seeing all the innovations that you, our industry, have to do as we transition to the new norm and pivot. There, I said it, everyone at home. Again, thank you very much. Lastly, this Thursday, live from SHFM, you can sign up to learn more about Kitchen to Kitchen, cooking at home live with SHFM. If you haven't signed up, please do so. And join on our website then for more information. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for your time.